You're watching the latest here on The Viewpoint. I am Afrida Rahman Ali. Today, we are taking up the story of a 25-year-old engineering student who was arrested earlier this week after he allegedly killed his parents. This happened in Nagpur. And the story goes that all of this happened because of a conflict over a career choice. The student left the bodies in the house where the murders were committed for 6 days before foul smell led to the discovery of the crime. Now, according to the police, the accused, Utkarsh Dhakole, allegedly killed both his parents, Leeladhar Dhakole and his wife Aruna, both in their 50s. And this happened over, as I mentioned, a prolonged period of conflict between the parent and the son over his decision to continue with engineering despite repeatedly failing his exams. So, that is on the surface the story, ostensibly what the police has reported. The crime took place on the 26th of December. It came to light on the 1st of January, but it has forced us all to think about what goes on in homes where there are these constant conflicts between the parent and the child over issues like, say, choice of partner, marriage, career choice, a number of these contentious issues where parents and their children often get into loggerheads can take a very, very dangerous turn. So, we are going to discuss this with Dr. Deepak Raheja, who's a senior psychiatrist and a psychotherapist. He's with us now, live joining this program. Thank you, Dr. Deepak. Welcome and thanks for joining us on Viewpoint. Is Deepak Raheja able to hear me? Okay. Welcome.
Yes.
Okay, I want to begin by asking you if you followed up this story, because let's start with this as a case study. Of course, we are going to the larger picture on why these things are happening with an alarming regularity, I have to say. We keep reporting these cases time and again, but I still feel these conversations are so important, Dr. Raheja. You are a very senior psychiatrist and you've been associated with the field of mental health for over a decade. In fact, let me tell our viewers here that you're also a philanthropist and you work for the cause of the mentally ill on the streets. And your experience is vast in this area. You're currently heading the Department of Psychiatry at a number of hospitals in Delhi and Gurgaon. So let me put this to you. Parent-child conflict, a frustration that turns into a murderous intent. How are you looking at this story, and what is it that you assess from a story like this that happened in Nagpur?
So essentially, this is gruesome and it is extremely worrying. Nonetheless, I would not recommend a sense of fear or paranoia to escalate, because this is not something that can be generalized, and all of us then start living in our homes with the fear that our child might just come to kill us or murder us. But this is definitely worrying, and this to me is reflective of an isolated situation, a case where the aspirations and ambitions of the child vis-a-vis the ambitions and aspirations of the parents, the mismatch between them, because the child was repetitively failing the exam, the choice of career. I mean, it's clearly we understand that he did not want to become an engineer. So, to a lot of extent, that's related to the glory of the family and the unfulfilled ambitions of the parents, which they want to project onto the child, and then want to feel accomplished both for their glory and the glory of the family, that the child is an achiever in a particular area, or he's done engineering and then goes to study technology or artificial intelligence or an MBA in business, brings back home a huge package, is able to marry the ideal daughter-in-law that the parents want and not what the child wanted. So it is also not that 2, 3, 4, 5 decades back the parents did not have authoritarian or controlling patterns like that, but the extent to which some parents can go overboard, not picking up the cues that may have emanated over a long time. So this is not something which is impromptu, which is just an
Happened
impulse that
overnight.
a
So there are
child decides
circumstances
to
you are
listen
saying
to
which
parents. It is
leads up to it. And there are situations which are ignored, not addressed. There is professional help available in doctors like you who are working in this field, and that help is not availed of. And therefore, the situation turns and gets into this. So, what you're telling me is that the cause can vary. It could be career choice, it could be choice of partner. But what is important is it can manifest into something like this. I mean, in most cases that we report, it's the student that commits suicide also. Here is just it just happened that the student exercised a different option. But do you believe it's the same pattern, whether it's an act of dying by suicide or committing a murder? It's after all that end of the world, and wanting the desperation to bring an end to the struggle. Is that what the pattern is, Dr. Raheja?
You've said it bang on, very right. It is a homicide or a suicide is that expression of violence which has gone haywire, which is reflected here, not in killing himself, because day in and day out we hear cases about students killing themselves. There are quota cases, and
Yeah.
there've been movies that have been made out of it, and this is an outward expression of the violence which is reflected onto the parents. So it is an absolute despair. It is an inability to control emotions, an absolute emotional dysregulation, a mental state where the individual does not have the coping mechanism to deal with the stress that got emanated, that got produced. And I strongly again say, this is not one off, this is not impromptu, this is not just purely an impulse. The telltale or maybe even more gross cues may have been brewing for a long time, for the parents not to see it, for them to be fixated, for them not to give up the authoritarian and controlling pattern of parenting. And it's too late now. We're not really playing the blame game as to
Yeah.
who was right or
So
who was wrong and
unless
how the blame should be
yeah,
removed. Loss of
yeah,
life,
unless
and and
damage hits the
and the
roof,
loss of
people
life
don't
is often
realize.
enough in the form of suicides, where unfortunately the discussions that happen are far few. It is an important statistic. It's reported in media, a little bit of discussion, and forgotten. And here, when the child goes ahead and kills the parents, it suddenly starts to worry society, because then we start grappling with that paranoia as to whether we are safe in our household, because homicide is definitely another form of that expressive violence, though it is a continuum of that same violence, whether it is reflected outward or inward, but it is a aberrant form of that violence, which then begins to worry society and forces them to take cognizance of it in more important ways. So I think it's these are important landmark situations, cases which should be reflective for society to go within and not
Yeah.
wait for
Before it
tragedies
is too
to happen.
late. That is what you said. Before it gets too late, you just like any physical ailment, isn't it? If you don't address it, if you let it brew, if you let the wound fester, what is it going to do? It's going to become toxic. It's going to eat you from within. And the same thing with these sort of situations. If there is a cancer within the home, it doesn't have to be a physical one. It can be a mental one. It can be a situation which is cancerous, and that can lead to someone's death. That is what I understood from you. But what you said, Dr. Deepak Raheja, I take that point and I want our viewers to take note of this and perhaps even share this information, because you said telltale signs, the awareness for it, the red flags. Can you expand and tell us typically what are those telltale signs when conflicts continue to happen between a parent and a child? When is it that you should think this is getting bad? Now, this is when we need to seek help. What are those telltale signs?
When you see a rapid change in the behavior, which is insidious. So rapid and insidious both are opposite of each other. But over a period, when you see
Mhm.
escalating pattern of
Mhm.
change in behavior of the child who was communicative is suddenly beginning to starting to feel cocooned and does not express so much. A child that was relatively quieter is beginning to show signs of anger. There are disturbances of
Mhm.
biological markers in terms of sleep, in terms of appetite, in terms of maybe reliance on a substance, like beginning to smoke, beginning to use a substance, a drug, using alcohol, and more often than not, intermittent explosive episodes of anger going haywire. So the overall pattern of violence within the family, of discontent within the family, of dissonance within the family, which seems like or can be passed off like the usual domestic discord or domestic soft violence, but that programs the child and the parents and the family to start to get attuned to it, to start to get tolerant and used to it. And then one such episode of that discord within the family can, prompt and give the courage to one of the person to act on that impulse, which at that moment, even though is intermittent, explosive, and
Mhm.
highly impulsive, but has brewed over a period of time,
So
giving
is it,
them.
yeah, is it a fit of rage? Is it impromptu, something that happens in the moment, or are you saying this is always premeditated? This is always something, the violent
This is
mindset.
usually in family situations, it is never really premeditated. And if it's premeditated, then we are dealing with people with very gross antisocial personality disorders, people who might have more severe form of psychiatric morbidity, who might be psychopathic. Usually it is more explosive, impulsive. It is an expression of that rage. But what is important here is that that rage has built up in small clusters over a period of time, and that rage by itself becomes the sensitizing and the desensitizing loci of both the or all the family and the concerned parties, stakeholders, to
Yeah.
start to accept that rage. And when
Mhm.
that
I
rage
want
then
to,
starts to become a norm, then you'll find that within the same household there are spells or wails and shouts and anger on more occasions than not. I mean, there are families within a household where you'd find that some kind of domestic discord and loud shouts and settlements of arguments happens a few times a week, and we tend to ignore all of that, hoping and believing that if it's not happening in my house, it's not my business to be privy or to be inquisitive or to be nosy about it. But unfortunately, even within the same household, all the stakeholders also start to some extent become oblivious to it. They start cutting themselves to it and are not so bothered. And the whole process then starts to become starts to of becoming of settling of scores or settling of arguments or proving in those discords as to who's right and who's wrong, notwithstanding the cortisol hyperactivity, the stress hormones that you are producing in your body, what it is doing. I mean, this is of course a very gross expression that to light. But even if for families that it doesn't happen, they're not living normal lives. They're living in constant
yeah,
stress, and
this
then
is
they
an
are
extreme step taken, but you're saying even much less than this, people should not ignore when things happen. Because I want to ask you
obviously.
this before I come to how you heal and what is your method for addressing, because that's also important for our viewers. I'll come to that. But since you said this repeated pattern, and then of course we will run this particular data about the similar cases that have happened before. But before I come to that, I want to ask you that when you say that these episodes of flare-ups, meltdowns that happen between a parent and a child is not uncommon. Let's face it. I mean, perhaps there wouldn't be a single home where there is no conflict between parent and child. That will also be very pretentious. The other thing you said is that controlling parent. that controlling parent, disapproving parent, do you think those are more susceptible cases where conflict can turn dangerous, where the parent is more like an authority in the house?
So I think the control also needs to be exercised with appropriate, jurisprudence and appropriate, thought that goes into it. Because vis-a-vis the nature of the relationship, you often find that parents have no choice but end up being controlling. But to
Hmm.
express that control, to exercise that control in a manner which is not so authoritarian, which does not come across as so controlling, which is not threatening to the child, should be the benchmark. So I think the key rule here is communication. I think it's very
Hmm.
important to back up whatever you talk to your child with reasoning. It can't be just because I feel that way, or I will refuse to give you any logic, or you can't go out at night, or you can't
But
do
doesn't the
this, or
communication itself become the reason for conflict? Sometimes what happens is the moment you communicate, it's a conflict. And if there is no communication,
unfortunately,
there is no conflict.
unfortunately not. The aberrant or dysregulated communication, and that's not just communication. That is almost suddenly jumping into the argumentative state of communication. So before the argumentative state, there are many more states of communication which are non-threatening, non-argumentative. They are assertive, and being assertive does not mean that it has necessarily to lead to an argument. Sometimes you can agree to disagree. Sometimes you can let the moment rest and come back to re-explore and revisit the issue. But I mean, for all times, but especially in the society that we live in now, it is important to communicate with the child, with evidence, with reasoning, to explain to them why you are recommending a certain thing, and then understand that the children will make mistakes. I mean, they necessarily don't need to live up to the expectations, which are the benchmarks that you have set for the household and for the parenting, because they could be aberrant also. They could be dysfunctional also, and if the child perceives it as dysfunctional, and if the child is not reasoned with, it would lead to that cumulative discontent and aggression. And unfortunately, if the aggression is passive aggression, it would or has the capacity at some time to explode into very dysfunctional, dysregulated behavior, like the case in hand, or the gazillion other cases where the children end up committing suicide, which also
Mhm.
may be
But talking
depression,
about these
but a lot of
suicides,
involves sorry, yeah.
no, talking about these suicides, we are shifting the focus a bit. Even though this is not a case of suicide, there has been a confession to the police by the student that he has indeed killed his parents. He first strangulated his mother, and then when the father returned from work, the father was stabbed. The bodies were left, like I said, for good 4 or 5 days until the foul smell drew the attention of the neighbors. The sister was then, first kept out of the scene, and the father's phone was used to communicate with her. So, I mean, there was an attempt to keep this under the wraps for some time, till, of course, police has now arrested the accused. I want to ask you on the point of suicide, because this is so common in engineering institutes. Last year, the figure was really staggering. The number of IIT suicides that have happened. Coaching centers have become toxic places where children take the extreme, students take the extreme step. These are teenagers, after all, because as I understand, after your 12th boards, when you enter an engineering college, you're still in your 17, 18, 19 years old. Is the environment inconducive when you are in that phase of your adulthood? Because young adults seem to be taking that route way too often in India, especially in engineering college campuses.
So, an environment which is extremely competitive, extremely demanding, where you still lack the emotional maturity, the coping skills and coping mechanisms, they are unfortunately in the vulnerable population, they are going down. And because children don't feel equipped, they go through cognitive dissonance, which brings about inability to deal with frustration. So the benchmark, the acceptance of mental health issues. So this
Mm.
could be some sample which has shown cues of a brewing mental, psychiatric, psychological morbidity for a while. The parents, and maybe also because of the societal norms, the child also is not willing to acknowledge that the coping mechanisms and coping skills that are required in the vulnerable few especially are going down. We are marred by comparisons that galore on social media. We are comparing our lives to lives of others around all the time. Our skill set to be able to deal with real life issues is going down because as a generation our screen time is growing up, and when the screen time continues to grow up, you find that there are certain areas in the brain that become hyperactive, and there are certain areas which become hypoactive, and this hyperactivity and hypoactivity leads to a neurochemical milieu in the neuroscientific domain of the brain, leading the child to go through anxieties, to impulse discontrol disorder, makes them prone to substance use. Also the unfortunately, even though there are strong biological genetic predeterminants to that, but the incidence of some of these personality issues or personality disorder is also beginning to go up.
Yeah,
So it's
I
not
want
just the
to
manner in which
tell us the biological part as well, because are you trying also saying that some of these cases there might be a predisposed condition which goes undetected?
I would definitely say that a whole
Hmm.
lot of them would also have biological determinants that
Okay.
predispose them to
Hmm.
that kind of rage. And
Oh.
and
Oh.
it's not anyone who will just wake up and will give
Mhm.
in to violence like that. So it'll be
Yeah.
those specific ones. But even in
Yeah.
those specific ones, the incidence and the number is escalating.
Mm.
The risks as a society that we are exposed to is increasing. The Like I said, the normal within the family now begins to get reestablished, and sometimes that long drawn discord begins to be the new normal. So like I was saying, these are some neighborhood where you will find that most ways or manner in which discontent is settled is through huge explosive arguments or loud fights that are happening, which then goes on to reestablish as a new normal for the family.
Yeah.
And in that new normal, then gradually, when that non-verbal, the verbal violence versus real violence, when that gets blurred and real physical assaultive violence begins to come in the picture, is sometimes blurry, and this may not be the first time that he
Yeah.
hit the parents. It may have happened before, or reciprocally, the parents may have battered the child during the childhood, and that becomes the role model for the child to learn. Or they might have been violence in the parents, between themselves. Again, redefining the acceptance of physical assaultive violence to the mind of the child. And when that child is exposed to a virtual world where all kinds of material is there, and for the vulnerable one, then it can predispose them to act out in the gruesome manner that this child ended
Right.
up acting.
I would like you to take a look at these cases that has happened before, Dr. Reja, and I'm sure you would be aware of some of them, over property disputes, son killing a father, over academic pressure, of course, is very, very common. And also things like financial issues, personal grievances. These are regular causes. This has happened across India: Delhi, Punjab, Mumbai. Then in the diaspora, in Indian origin families abroad as well. And this is, of course, the latest case that has happened in Nagpur. But in Delhi, also a similar case of a 20-year-old getting arrested for murdering parents and sister. So the entire family there was eliminated. In Ghazipur As you can see, a 15-year-old boy killed parents and brother over opposition to his marriage. That's again a very common reason for conflict. And in Jaipur, killing parents and sister due to mobile phone addiction. And you rightly mentioned that, this entire screen addiction and obsession is somewhere interfering with our mental wellness and is not adequately addressed. Do you feel that the mental health of teenagers in particular is not prioritized? And you've used the word normalized a lot, but there is no awareness that there can be an issue which can be addressed. So, how do you get people to understand that there is help available if you see these patterns? Do you face that in your practice of your profession, that people who you could have saved, perhaps this murders would not even have been committed if this particular engineering student got access to someone like you at the right time?
I would think that amidst tragic incidents like these, as and when they happen, there are many hundreds of situations that are salvaged by various mental health professionals the world over. Unfortunately, we talk about the ones which have had a tragic end like this. And
Yeah,
I think we need to also be thankful to professionals like yourself, the media, which is more open to discussions like these, spreading mental health awareness, where people are more
right.
privy to understanding that there is help available. And
Yeah,
in between these episodes, one in 2014, then one in 2018, and one in 2020, and then one in 2023. I mean, I saw
mm,
on your screen about five
mm,
such episodes that you
mm.
narrated. There would be hundreds of thousands
Yeah,
of
yeah, absolutely
situations that are
unreported.
being saved and salvaged by mental health
Mm,
professionals world over.
yeah.
And I would not shy away from saying that even though mental health is not a priority still as much as it should be, but we have a
Mm,
new act in the country, Mental Health Act of 2017,
mm,
which clearly says that mental health has to be prioritized and considered equivalent of importance to physical health. There are steps taken in that, including insurance cover that is available for mental health intervention. So I think the society per se is waking up to the fact that they cannot be complete health without mental health, and mental health is as important, sometimes more important than physical health, because if the brain is not working well, if the central government is not working well, the states will go haywire. So if the brain, which is the central controlling agency of the entire body, it controls all the hormonal, endocrinal functions of the body. If that is in good space, if you are people who are happy, and there are now multiple studies to show people who are happy, they lead a better life, they are disease free. If they have a disease, the prognosis is much better, the outcome is much better. And I think we learned that pretty much during the COVID time also. People who were in good
mm.
state
Stigma
expressed better.
issues. I want to understand, because see, if you're a brain doctor, if you're a brain health doctor, you're called a psychiatrist. That has a bit of a stigma attached to it, if I'm not mistaken. Because if you're a cardiologist, if you're a heart doctor, if you're an orthopedic, ophthalmologist, there is no stigma around going to a eye doctor. But there is some stigma going to a brain doctor, somebody who's, and that, like you said, is the epicenter that controls everything. Isn't it unfortunate that we have this situation where people
It is
carry that
definitely.
stigma even today?
It is definitely very unfortunate, but unfortunately enough, that stigma is not just contained to our country or subcontinent. It is the world over. For a
Mm,
long time, people continued to believe that to ask for help is a sign of weakness. How can I
mm,
not be able to control my conflicts and my problems on my own? And I don't really need the help of a psychologist or a counselor or a psychiatrist. A lot of myths that go around, psychiatric treatments or medication, in terms of the medication may be habit forming, or once you start, you won't be able to stop. But these are such strong myths, because there is safe medication available, which should be used when used appropriately, the right quantity for the right period of time. is
Yeah.
life saving. So for a lot of these cases, we feel very sorry that if help could be mustered at the right moment, these lives could have been saved. But there are many lives, like I said, that continue to get saved because we are willing to spend that extra time to help break those myths that shroud psychiatric and mental health treatments.
Yeah,
and
Dr.
and
Raheja, this video is going live. A lot of people are watching us right now. And there are some comments coming that it's very informative, and thanks to you, actually. Also asking, what about parents who are killing children? So, like we discussed in the early part of the discussion, it happens both ways. The rage factor, the conflicts that reach that sort of a situation where settling of scores, again, to steal your words. Uh, if you could answer that question of our viewer who's writing in from Maharashtra.
so exactly the
And
question
please
was.
write more questions since Dr. Raheja is with us. I think you'll be happy to take some of the viewer
No,
queries. Go ahead, Doctor.
it'll be a pleasure. Can you
Yeah,
paraphrase the question again to me?
yeah.
The last question.
Very informative discussion. What about parents who are killing kids?
I would definitely put that strong message to parents also, that
Mm,
authoritarian parenting, controlling parenting, helicopter parenting, the
mm,
child has come from you, but you do not control or own the child. It is
very
unfair
important.
to try and fulfill your own unfulfilled ambitions slash aspirations through your child. Be reasonable. We fortunately live in a world today where there's dignity of jobs. You could be a chef and
Mm,
earning more than the best professional, which may be in media or in medical science. You may
mm,
be a techie. You may be any profession. You may be a dancer. You may be a singer. You may be a performer, and you could do well. So that like somebody beautifully said, give me a job that I love to do, and I will not have to work a single minute in my life.
yeah.
So in our Vedantic text, we say swadharma, finding the right action, the right work, and that right work will only come when you're willing to give yourself that creative expression, and willing
Mm,
to give your child that creative expression for the child to be able to choose what will make him happy to do. So do not, like in the West, we heard that at 30, 40, 50, 60, they had the courage to what they called as start over, where they could
mm,
just forget everything, their identity, what they learned, what their profession was, and willing to learn something all over again, and willing to do something all over again. I think that is the epitome of a healthy society where we do not scuttle that creative expression in our children. So it's
yeah.
okay for them to blossom, if I may say something very crude, which may not appeal to a lot of people, but I would still go ahead and say it. I have, and this is an analogy I'd read somewhere, and I'll repeat it. I have a beautiful dog, and I never question him to say, why did you eat the food that you did? What are you doing to prove your existence? What have you done worthy of living the life that you are? I just accept him for what he is, totally
Mm,
unconditionally, for the fact that he's able to receive love and give love. I think
mm.
we
That
need to
should be the
somewhere
equation.
start with our children with the same expression, and do not continuously put them on the yardstick of what have you done to deserve this life. Why are you living this life? Why are you're 23, 22, 24? Why are you not earning enough? So those
Because that is
benchmarks.
what happened with the Nagpur student. The parents decided that he has to quit engineering since he was failing repeatedly. Now, while you may have a point, after all, parents are the best well wishers and it is only with a good intent. But when, like you use this word about hounding the child, right? Like constantly hammering a child on a particular thing. That is what leads to this sort of a pattern where the child revolts because then it has hit somewhere else, not your intended spot. It has probably provoked something else or pressed some other button which was avoidable, right? So when we talk of these patterns, Dr. Raheja, now let me come to what is the method you use because I see that you have an eclectic mix of things that you do to heal and to address. Can you enlighten us on a few of your
So,
methods?
Unfortunately, specifically in this dialogue, the parents delusionally start to believe that they are doing it for the good of the child, where they don't realize that in the process, they are just acting out to possibly fulfill their own unaccomplishments and their void in their own life, making life miserable for the child and for themselves, choking the path of that creative success or the right choices that the child could have made. So I think in the eclectic approach that you speak about and that we often practice is to give that creative expression. I think more than the child, the parents need that counsel. They need to revisit the dynamics of parenting. They need to understand that communication is the only thing that will give way to a nurturing and blossoming relationship that they have with the child. I think with that, if they are privy to a mental health crisis that the child may be going through, or a mental health crisis that the parents may be going through, and for either of them or any of the stakeholder within the family unit to be able to recognize that or to understand this to be a family issue and do not shirk away or shy away from reaching out for help or intervention. There is plenty of helps available. You could go to a psychologist, you could go to a therapist, you could go to a counselor, you could go to a psychiatrist, and all of them work in tandem with different approaches. And it is important to find the right approach, the right fit.
Dr. Raheja, I take the liberty of posting your contact as well, because our idea is to spread awareness and also help those who actually need this help, right? So I will have to put out information on how to reach you, for instance, for our viewers, which I will be doing after we upload this video. And I would request our viewers to share this information, the way you put it. And this is so important that, it comes from an expert about how you should never brush anything under the carpet, because the moment there is a pattern, the moment it happens repeatedly, you know that this could lead to something disastrous like it happened in this particular case. In conclusion, Dr. Raheja, can you tell me how is India doing, since you, of course, had psychiatry departments in many hospitals, you know the statistics. How is our country doing in addressing teenage psychiatric issues? How good or how bad are we in dealing with these issues? How far ahead or behind are we?
I think I will very firmly and clearly say that we are quite progressive. We are, and not just me, because of the ethos that our subcontinent comes with. We most of us stand up using a very eclectic and a pragmatic approach. We offer our patients an mix of the right counsel, the right advice, and do not have an over reliance in trying to be pill pushers or trying to advocate medication. And amidst that, I think we also now boast of attracting a lot of patients from neighboring countries or even in the West who travel all the way in the name of medical tourism and come here and seek help for serious mental health issues, or with online consults like this, which you could do over a Zoom or a video platform. They seek second opinions, and sometimes they settle more with the doctor from Asia or from India, whom they believe has a more of a broader and a holistic approach rather than just the approach of finishing a session in 10 minutes and writing a medication and asking the patient to leave. So, because we have that advantage, and it comes with the right admix that comes from our ethos, from our understanding of Vedic scriptures, from our mythology, from the texts that we read, and from the spiritual underpinnings that then govern and direct us into helping our patients with
I
the
think that
right
will
approach.
draw in a lot of people, because the moment you have that desi approach, if I may use that word, where you connect people to spirituality drawn from our scriptures, I think that is when you become, I guess, more powerful as a healer. And there is a lot of reliance on spirituality in our country, and therefore a little surprise there that you're saying doctors in India or specialists like yourself have taken that approach. Perhaps that works very well. I would really appreciate you, Dr. Deepak Raheja, for joining us today, for giving us such valuable information. And I request all our viewers to please share this video as well, because there is vital information. I will be putting in contacts of Dr. Deepak Raheja as well to reach out, because I'm sure somebody around you might need help. Keep a watch for that as well, not just in your family, in your circle of people, in your neighborhood, because we need to help out each other in these situations. There should not be another case of a 25-year-old killing his parents. Thank you, Dr. Deepak Raheja,
Thank
for
you.
joining.
Thank you, Afrida.